Afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. JLR Investigates. Come on in. Come on in. Shifting gears back to the terrible tragedy that occurred in Winder, Georgia, Barrow County last Wednesday, the mass shooting. We've been covering this case extensively on JLR Investigates, the twists and turns, the newest information that keeps coming out. And there's some bombshell new information we need to share in reference to the mother. That is really shocking to me, but not necessarily surprising. And it also fills in the gaps and it reveals a clue. So let's talk. Come on in. We're talking about the case of Colt Gray, the 14-year-old that committed this terrible mass shooting at Apalachee High School last Wednesday morning. 4 people were killed. 4 people tragically lost their lives, 9 injured, a lot of people traumatized, a lot of families still want answers. And we saw the process where he got arrested and his dad eventually got arrested, Colin Gray, and we watched the court hearings. We did deep dives into the family, the family drama and the family instability between just with Colt Gray's mom and his dad and everyone, the separation, hearing a little bit from the side of the family on Colt's mother's side. But there is some new shocking information out. And apparently, according to the Daily Mail and other news reports, the mother, Marcee Gray, who apparently is out free because she had legal trouble last year. She was sentenced to a few months in jail, followed by extensive probation for all those incidents that happened in November last year. Apparently, the mother, this is shocking. So on the morning of the shooting, before the shooting, Colt here texted his mom. And I think he said, "I love you." He might have said some more things. And the mother took that as a sign that something very bad is about to happen. So the mother immediately contacted the school and apparently spoke to the counselor. And we're going to talk about this counselor and maybe other school officials about 30 minutes before the shooting. And possibly, folks, that they tried to intervene or tried to hunt Colt down to try to find out what's going on here, because the mother said there was emergency. And apparently they maybe found the wrong Colt Gray, because at the time of this case, which was wild, was at the time of this case, they were sharing another photo of a Colt Gray. Actually, his name was Colton Gray, spelled with a K. And even the sheriff touched on that afterward and said that it's the wrong guy. And everyone was posting a photo of Colton Gray as if it was the Colt Gray, the shooter. But apparently authorities or the school administration tracked down to a class, but got the wrong Colt Gray, and it got the other Colt Gray, or Colton Gray, or Colt Gray, and got his backpack or whatever, but they got the wrong guy. And then ultimately he started committing the shooting. But it was warning signs that the mother sent out. Now, it's interesting because we were speculating on JLR Investigates. Yeah, is the mother responsible? Is the mother going to get charged? The mother get charged? There was no indication whatsoever from the Barrow County Sheriff, GBI, or any authorities, even the District Attorney, Brad Smith, saying that they were going to charge the mother at all. I only heard from Brad Smith saying additional charges are coming on him. And we were kind of like, we don't think the mom's going to get charged because the mother wasn't living in the house. And it seems like there was serious bad blood between the mother's side of the family and Colt and his dad Colin's side. So, we were like, I don't think the mother's going to get charged. We don't think the mother's involved. We don't think charges are going to come. So we really didn't say, hey, is charges going to come on the mother? She's going to get charged. Like, to me, it was like she's never going to get charged. Now, with this new information that's out there that she actually warned the school, there's no way the mother could be charged with this. I mean, the mother seems like she did what she needed to do in that situation when the available information came to her. Not only that, folks, but apparently the mother, who lived 3 hours away from the school, apparently after she got that text from the son, called the school, warned the school what was going on, spoke to a counselor. By the way, the counselor's name is Lisa Butler. We'll talk a little bit about her. Then jumped in her vehicle and started racing to the school 3 hours away. And then the mother, on the way to the school, then she found out the shooting occurred. So it seems like the mother tried her best to stop the situation. But it gets deeper, folks, because this is the side of Colt's mom's side of the family. Now, we heard from Annie, the aunt, and we heard about that Polhamus blood, and, other people failed, and she's going to fight for Colt and everything like that. Maybe if you put yourself a little bit in her shoes, you can maybe understand a little bit what she's talking about. We took it as a threat, and she was like a little wacky, and she might be wacky. But in a sense, now that more stuff is coming out, it makes me think, whoa, maybe, just maybe, like Annie's side of the family, maybe particularly his grandparents, really tried their best to fix the situation, or at least raise the red flags and start raising the red flags, saying something's going on with this kid. Case in point, another news report that we shared. So the mother contacted the school just before the shooting occurred, but the grandparents also, there's also media reports that the grandparents, Charles Polhamus, who was a pole vault champion, and Debbie, which is his grandparents, apparently called the school or contacted the school, or maybe even went to the school a week before the shooting occurred to let the counselor, here we go, counselor again, let the counselor know about his deteriorating mental state, or his mental state of something going on. So it seems like, to me, the counselor has been aware of this individual for quite some time. But what I find striking and odd is there's conflicting information when he actually started going to this school. Because if the grandparents, because there's students out there that are claiming that the day of the shooting, this was only his second day of going to the school. He went first day after Labor Day, Tuesday. Wednesday, shooting occurred. Now, a student has come out and said that was only his second day at the school. School has been in session there for a while, and said that he enrolled 2 weeks prior. Enrolled, but never went until the first time on that day after Labor Day. And then a day later, commits the shooting. Now, it might make sense to me, because remember, the neighbor across the street from his dad's house, and we played that clip of that lady, the neighbor across the street claims that when she saw the morning of the shooting, she saw him in front of the house with another girl getting on the bus to school. And she said, that's the first time I ever seen this boy there at the house, which seems to me a little bit odd. Something tells me that Colt Gray, before this shooting occurred, might have been somewhere else, not even at his own dad's house. Might have been somewhere else in someone else's custody. Maybe even in the state had him at one point. I don't know. And that's a mystery to me, because how does a neighbor, and it's unclear when they actually moved into that house where he lived with his dad, because how's the neighbor seeing this guy for the first time, where the neighbor claims the only people the neighbor saw living in that house was the dad and the two younger siblings, not him, and didn't even know he existed. So there's some strange stuff, but it makes me feel like the grandparents contact the school before, after he gets enrolled, but he doesn't go to school the first time till the day after Labor Day. Makes me go, a little bit. Makes me go, like, where was he staying if he wasn't even in that house? Because neighbors know everyone's neighbor knows who's who, particularly in these areas, right? Your neighbor knows who's living in the house. And she said, I never even saw this dude prior to the shooting. Like, prior to that day, I never saw the dude at all. So it makes me think, like, was he living with somebody else? Was he living with his grandparents? Was he living with somebody else? Was he in state custody at the time? Did CPS take him away and then finally bring him back into the hands of his dad? Because we don't know anything about these CPS reports right now going on. So that there's still some mystery to the situation. But yeah, folks, come on in. The mother warned the school, according to these reports, bombshell reports. Text from Georgia school shooter's mother revealed she warned of extreme emergency minutes before her son opened fire. And it says, the mother of suspected Apalachee school shooter Colt Gray told her family that she called her son's school to warn them of an emergency on the morning that he allegedly killed 4 people. Marcee Gray, the alleged shooter's mother, was seen in text messages shared by the Washington Post, telling her family, I told them it was an extreme emergency and for them to go immediately and find my son and check on him.
The outlet reported that a call log from the family's shared phone plan shows Gray made a 10-minute call to the school at 9:50 a.m. on Wednesday. It's about a half hour before the school shooting occurred. So,
9:50 a.m. Colt here, or let me, hold on. She called the school at 9:50. But before that, Gray here, Colt notified the mom and said, "I'm sorry, Mom." The text read, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Mom." Marcee's mother, Charles Polhamus, told the New York Post that Colt had delivered an apology to his mother via text prior to the shooting, prompting her to call the school. "I'm sorry, Mom." Some other report said, "I love you." So I'm looking for the report that says, "I love you." But nevertheless, it raised alarm bells on the mother that the son was texting her that. Now, it's interesting, though, because if you get a text from your son or siblings that says, "I love you," or "I'm sorry, Mom," is that going to make you think to contact the school immediately and say, "Oh my God, you got to check on my son. It's an emergency," just by a simple text that says, "I'm sorry," or "I love you"? Thinks a little bit weird. It thinks like the mother, it makes me think like the mother might have known, about this guy's mental health or this guy's danger or whatever like that, enough to just get a text like that and says, "I'm sorry," for her to contact the school. So it's very, very interesting there. But taken back, it goes back, and apparently she notified the counselor. Marcee then hopped in her car and started driving toward the school more than 3 hours away. But about halfway there, she learned that the tragedy had happened. A counselor at the school. Here's what's crazy. Now, this is the bombshell. We're going to talk about this counselor. This is where I find, whoa, how can this even be? This report says a counselor at the school told Marcee that her son had been talking about school shootings that morning, according to Gray's sister, Annie Brown, who spoke to the Post. What in the world is going on here, folks? The counselor, now this is before the shootings, and the counselor, it was saying that Colt Gray was talking about shootings. What? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The counselor heard, according to Annie Gray, the counselor could say this is not true. This is the Polhamus family saying that the counselor was aware. The counselor was aware, and this is the counselor. We're going to put the counselor out there because there's some strange things going on here. Strange things going on here. Here's the counselor right here. Lisa Butler. So the counselor, according to Annie, was aware that Colt was making or saying things about mass shootings or school shootings. So how can this even be that the counselor didn't stop it at the time, and then enough for Colt to text his mom saying things, and then Colt's mom contacting the school and apparently talking to the counselor or administrators, and them not stopping? Make it make sense. Make it make sense. In text messages, in reported text seen by Marcee, she told her family, "I was the one that notified the school counselor at the high school." They seen texts, and the texts show that Marcee was speaking with the counselor. Right here, Lisa Butler. According to Brown, her sister called the school because she learned something concerning that made her feel an impending disaster. However, it was not reported what it was that she learned. Her sister, Annie Brown, said that Marcee was told by a counselor that her son was displaying disturbing behavior that morning, talking about school shootings. Are you kidding me? She knew. Or what I'm saying is, according to the family, she knew. But why am I putting her face out there? Because I want to show you something. Remember, this was a week prior. This news report right here was from a week prior. Or what I'm saying is the grandparents a week prior also notified the counselor about Colt's behavior.
Is that the grandmother actually went to the school the week before the shooting happened to meet with a counselor in order to try to set up therapy for this 14-year-old. So that was 7 days or less prior to the shooting happening. Is that the grandmother actually went to the school the week before the shooting happened to meet with a counselor in order to try to set up therapy for this 14-year-old. So that was
1 week before the shooting. 1 week before the shooting. Let's get Magnolia in the chat a little bit and talk a little bit. That's shocking. It seems like the counselor knew. And the counselor, according to the family side, the mother side, the counselor was aware that he was talking about school shootings. And wow. Hello, Magnolia.
Yeah, what's going on, everybody? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Magnolia. So I put the counselor out there, and this latest report that the mother received correspondence from the son. Your take?
Yeah, so we heard about the counselor a few days ago from one of the students at the school who actually emailed us, and we mentioned it just because it was information being relayed, and the student that emailed us said that he felt a lot of the blame should be on the counselor. And so we kind of covered that a couple days ago, and at the time we were like, well, how would the counselor, how would this be the counselor's fault? But I felt like there was something to it, because otherwise why would he say something so directly like that?
Said that she was to blame.
Yeah, so he was kind of just saying that she's the type of counselor that doesn't really support the students the way they feel they should be supported. And so a lot of people don't even go to her. They try to switch counselors and get a different counselor and things like that. But yeah, so we know the grandparents were in touch with the school the week before. Now, Charles Polhamus, actually, he lives in Fitzgerald, Georgia. And that's where Marcee was that morning. Marcee was visiting him at his house in Fitzgerald, Georgia, when she got a text from Colt saying, "I'm sorry, Mom." And she immediately felt something was wrong and called the school to warn that there was an extreme emergency. And one of her relatives conveyed her, I guess she had texted her sister. Marcee texted her sister and said, "I was the one that notified the school counselor at the high school. I told them it was an extreme emergency and for them to go immediately and find my son to check on him." And then after she got the text, she got in her car and started driving to Winder, which was 3 hours away from where she actually was. So as she's driving, she's about halfway there and sees and hears the reports that there was a shooting at the school. So now I think Marcee was actually seen. Let me see if I can get any pictures. Yeah, so she was actually seen yesterday. Let me send you this article. And I guess she's back in the Fitzgerald area. But she told the Washington Post that she's quoted as saying to the Washington Post, "It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I'm so, so sorry." And saying that she can't imagine what people are going through who experience this. She said, let's see.
If you got that article, send it to me and I can show it.
Yeah, this is the New York Post. So Yeah, so she's spoken a little bit the last couple of days to reporters, and that's how come we're getting a little bit more information. So she actually spoke directly with the Washington Post. I believe it was mainly via text. But yeah, so she expressed a lot of regret and remorse that this happened. Now, also, remember that the sister had said, basically the sister, the grandfather, they're blaming Colin, the dad, for all this. And they apparently knew that he was struggling with his mental health, and he had been talking about homicidal thoughts, suicidal thoughts, and they even said that Colt was begging for mental help. He was begging for help in recent weeks. And, they said the family remarked that he should have been in therapy long before now. And so, once again, this all seems to be going back to the father, because remember, Marcee was banned from even being around the father because of her incident with her family. And so we kind of had that feeling from the start, when we were discussing the parents, and it did seem pretty clear that the mother was somewhat removed from his life, at least physically, for at least several months. So I wondered, if she would face any type of consequences for any of this. But, it sounds like she had her own issues with the law and drugs and different things like that, and was ordered to stay away from Colin. And so she's kind of out of the picture, but clearly she's still in contact with Colt, because she's the one that he actually reached out to that morning and said, "I'm sorry."
But she's not prohibited, according to the court documents. It only said she was prohibited from speaking or contacting Colin, not her son.
Yeah. As far as we know, it was just Colin.
But just let me ask you something, Magnolia. But just a simple text or whatever correspondence she got with him, "I'm sorry." I mean, that's enough to make her contact the school to say that he's, extreme emergency. Why would just a simple text?
Well, that's not the only thing that happened. I just said he had been talking and saying for weeks that he was having homicidal and suicidal thoughts. He was struggling with his mental health. He was begging for help, begging for therapy, things like that. So they knew that he was struggling. And so, for a mom to get a random text message from her son at 9-something in the morning on a Wednesday when he's supposed to be in school, and all it says is, "I'm sorry, Mom," that would alarm any mother, I think, in this situation. Knowing that he's struggling, knowing he's at school, that he has a gun, different things like that. I think just those 3 words would definitely raise alarm bells for any mom. So I think she did the right thing, obviously, calling the school. But the question is, what happened? Because she called the school at 9:50. The shot started at 10:23, so that was 33 minutes that they had. Not only that, he left the classroom at 9:45, so that would have been 5 minutes before her phone call. It sounds like the timing might have been that he got up from the class, sent his mom that text, which prompted her phone call, and then he went and retrieved his gun. And for whatever reason, in that 33-minute period of time, they did not apprehend him or find him in the school. Or I don't know, did they not go look for him? There is that report you mentioned that there's another student with a similar name who the teacher got his backpack. But that would be a very unfortunate mix-up.
Well, it is a mix-up, and actually there's there is somebody similar in there. Let me see if I can continue to follow it, see if it's in the report. Apparently they did go to a classroom and retrieved a backpack belonging to someone with a similar name. That wasn't him. So my question is this:
it was an administrator that went searching for him.
We don't know who the administrator was. Could have been the counselor? Because Annie keeps saying.
I think if it was the counselor, it would have said a counselor was searching for Colt, but it specifically says an administrator. And this goes back to something that we heard early on. Someone had spoken out and said, why was there a female staff member looking for him and not the school resource officer? So the question is, why did the counselor not immediately tell the school resource officer so that they could go look for him? Why was the school resource officer only notified because the emergency button had been pressed?
So the report's saying that more or less the family, the mother called the counselor and spoke to the counselor. So I'm assuming then at that point, if it wasn't the counselor who went to track him down, it was the counselor relaying that information to an administrator, and the administrator out there looking for him to try to track him down. Now the question is, did the counselor give the administrator wrong information? You know what I mean? Since the counselor maybe was just like, okay, well, look in their computer, Colton Gray, okay, and they gave him the wrong Colton Gray. Or something like that. You know what I mean? Like the counselor really didn't know what was going on. But here's the thing is, why is Annie claiming that the counselor was claiming that he was talking about committing a shooting before the shooting?
Right. Yeah, I mean, he must have been making some kind of statements for her to relay that back to the mother. But again, it's like, you know, the mom said this is an extreme emergency. It seems like they would have done everything possible to find him immediately.
No, no, he should have been detained immediately by the school resource officer as soon as the counselor heard the word school shooting out of his mouth. He should have been detained immediately. That counselor should have contacted school officials or police or somebody. As soon as he was talking about the words school shooting, they should have got him right there and not let him go out of the counselor's sight. But apparently, now again, this is what Annie is claiming. This is what Annie's claiming. So Annie might not be telling the truth. But apparently it seems like the counselor was aware of something. Now the question is what? Like what wording exactly? Now this is coming out of Annie's mouth. Only the counselor will be able to answer that, if the counselor even will answer that.
Yeah, the Washington Post I think the Washington Post is actually the original source of most of this information, because they have been in contact with the family, and they were provided text messages from the family. So they're saying there were text messages obtained by the Washington Post, and they did an interview with the family member. So there was a call log from the family's shared phone plan, which shows a 10-minute call from the mother's phone to the school starting at 9:50 a.m. I was the one that notified the school counselor at the school. Marcee Gray texted her sister following the shooting on September 4th. I told them it was an immediate emergency and to immediately find my son and check on him. A counselor told Gray during the call that her son had been talking about a school shooting that morning. Around the same time, a school administrator went to the son's math class, according to Lila Sarah. That's the girl that did the interview from algebra class. She said there seemed to be confusion because of another student in the class with a name similar to Gray. Neither student was actually in the room, but the official left with a backpack belonging to the other student. And the shooting began moments later. Now they're saying the phone log, texts, and interviews provide the strongest indications yet that officials at Apalachee High were alerted to concerns about the suspect on the morning of the shooting and may have been looking for him in the minutes before he killed 4 and injured 9. The texts also show that the school and the family were in contact about his mental health a week before the shooting. and Annie told a relative that the teen at the time was having homicidal and suicidal thoughts. So now Marcee reached out to the Washington Post and confirmed the details of those texts and phone logs. They said she declined to elaborate on what had prompted her to call in the warning, but she said she had shared that information with law enforcement. She said the shooting was absolutely horrific and expressed remorse for the students and parents. I'm so sorry and cannot fathom the pain and suffering they are going through right now. Let's see if there's anything else in here that we don't know. So Annie also told the Washington Post that her son or her nephew had spent months, quote, begging for mental health help, and that the adults around him failed him.
Well, that would be months, plural. That would be outside the scope of the school, just mental health in general, because he only started school recently there, and school was only in session for a month at the time.
Yeah.
In general, so this is seems like something going back in back to the summer when he started doing the alarming. But again, it takes me back. My mind's thinking this. Now, Annie could be lying in the fact that they're telling the truth that the mother contacted the school via text. The evidence is the text, or the call logs, right? And the text.
Yeah.
So the Washington Post said they obtained the text and the call logs, and it shows the mother clearly spoke with school from 9:50 for 10 minutes.
Right, and it also showed the text messages between the grandparents and the school the week before. So they were given all these texts and screenshots. So,
but what I'm saying with Annie, not to cut you off, what I'm just saying with Annie is, Annie goes to says additional information regarding that, saying the counselor said that he was talking about school shootings before the shooting happened. That's what Annie says.
Yeah.
If that's true, I personally think this is a big problem.
Well, yeah, and here's a little bit more detail on the grandparents' efforts. Washington Post says the week before the shooting, Colt's grandmother, Deborah Polhamus, had met with a school counselor to request help for him. He starts with the therapist tomorrow, Debbie wrote in a text message to Annie after that meeting. So he was expected to start therapy. But they're saying that it's unclear if he attended that therapy session or not. Annie is saying in text from August 29th that she was hopeful about the plans the family made to get him into therapy. And she also raised concerns about access to guns. She wrote in a text message, he's been having homicidal and suicidal thoughts. He shouldn't have a gun, and he should have been in therapy months ago.
Unbelievable, Magnolia.
Yeah, so I have some more information too, on this backstory here. So we're learning more and more about the home life, the upbringing, the things that Colt went through. And to be fair, a lot of this comes from Charles Polhamus, the grandfather, Marcee's father.
The pole vault champion.
Yes. So he is saying, let me go back to
I'm going to get a picture of Charles so we're all reminded of who he is. This guy, Charles, has been speaking. He's been speaking to the media. He's a pole vault champion guy.
Yeah.
And, it seems like his life is in order, by the way. So out of all this mix of this craziness on with Marcee and Colin, it seems like Charles and his wife, the grandparents on the mother's side, actually have their act together, and seems like they genuinely care.
Yeah, and everyone is about to get a fuller picture of what led to all this. So Charles Polhamus, he has said that he blames Colin as much or more than Colt, right? We've already heard that. Now, he has said that Colt's dad, Colin, is evil and claims that Colin Gray got Marcee addicted to drugs and ruined their family. Colin Gray, this is a quote, he said this outside of his home apparently. Colin Gray did this to his family and he will rot in hell for it. That's a fact. He needs the death penalty. He is probably one of the worst narcissists in the world. And he goes on to say that Colt was driven to this because of his father. He's a good kid turned bad in a bad situation. An environment that a kid grows up in has everything to do with what they become. Colin regularly screamed at Marcee and the kids. Marcee herself once described herself as a victim of abuse and wrote that her kids were thriving after she and Colin split up last year. Polhamus accused Colin of becoming addicted to opiates a few years ago after hurting his back. He allegedly pressured Marcee to obtain drugs for him when doctors refused to hand over prescriptions.
Ooh.
Living in that environment, they lost their house, he lost his job. For 2 years, he laid on his back and never did a thing. Marcee worked. They had a $500,000 farm before all this happened, and they lost it.
Oh, those are the farm pics, right? With the barrels of hay and stuff when they were younger?
Yeah, and so he goes on to say Colin is 100% for running Colt off the rails. Marcee has been clean for about a year and a half and found a good paying job, her dad said, before he theorized the damage her ex-husband had done to the family was too much for the kids to recover from. 0 on Marcee. Marcee never did anything to Colt. All she did was help him out. He says the reports saying she abused him are not true. Colt didn't cause that to happen. He didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to kill people. He came out of an environment. And he's saying he's saying about his daughter being with Colin for 11 years. If you live in that kind of relationship for 11 years, you're not going to stay stable. Adding that the relationship absolutely changed his daughter. And he went on to say, vengeance is mine, say the Lord. He's getting what he deserves, and my grandson's getting what he deserves too. Colt has to pay for what he did, but I'm telling you, he was driven. No question in my mind. He was driven by his father to do what he did. That's as plain as I can put it, and I know I'm right.
Wow. So that's coming from the
blame.
Well, yeah, and I know some people in the chat were saying it's hearsay, and it's Charles saying it. But it does paint a picture, and there's some things that do make sense out of that based off just what we've seen as far as just the track record and everything like that. Marcee had a little issue with the law, around 2000, what would it be, 8? Something like that?
It was 2007, so that would have been like 15 years ago or something, right?
And then there was like really no blemishes on her or nothing going on until the stuff in the last couple years. And the stuff in the last couple of years was centered around drugs. It looked like meth and fentanyl and different drugs. And stealing and not paying her debts and bills and Are you there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like just in the last few years, at the time, Marcee was saying on Facebook that she was getting out of this abusive relationship that she had with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And, she went through the legal process in November. Still had issues with her own sister, Annie, and I don't think Annie and her are on good terms, though. The way I see it. But, the morning of the shooting, she's there with the grandparents at the house in Fitzgerald, 3 hours away.
Yeah, when they split up, Marcee, the two younger kids went with Marcee and Colt went with Colin.
But that's strange, though, because the neighbor across the street from Colin and Colt said that the only kids that she's seen in that house was the two younger kids. Remember that?
Which neighbor?
The neighbor across the street from Colt and Colin said that she never saw Colt at that house prior to the morning of the shooting. She didn't even know that Colt even lived in that house. And she said the only people that she seen was the two younger children and the father.
I don't know who that is, and I can't verify what that person said. What we know is they are separated, and Marcee had custody of the two younger kids, and Colt lived with Colin.
Unless he gets visitations, unless he gets some sort of visitation or something, you know what I mean, once in a while.
Well, I mean, I just think that we have a clear picture now of what happened here. This is a woman who, she had some mild issues back when she was younger. But by all accounts, she had a career. She was doing well for herself. She's got degrees. She was, teaching her sons how to do welding and just different things like that. And, this thing with Colin, when they're saying that he hurt his back and ended up getting addicted to opiates, that's a really, really common thing. You can become addicted to opiates very quickly. And once it happens, you will do just about anything to get those drugs. And if you don't have the drugs, you can have extreme withdrawals. It's not good. So, I think if it's true what they're alleging, that he was making Marcee help him find drugs and things like that, her getting back in with this crowd of drugs and different things when she had been doing well for so many years, I mean, that's probably when she started using drugs again. So, and that just kind of added to it. So it sounds like it was a volatile marriage, a lot going on. We know they were evicted in 2020, and they went back to the house to only get the guns. They didn't take anything else. They left the dogs and everything else behind. But it just seems like that is the time period in question where things really started going downhill for all these people. And Colin is addicted. She's back into drugs. She's spiraling. All these things are happening. She's doing violent things to her own family. Colt's stuck in the middle of all this. And yeah, I think you could kind of just see like how we got to this place where we are. And it's really sad that the grandparents and the mother, it seems that they're about 3 hours away. So they're not like right there where Colt lived, and he's in the custody of his father, so they probably felt like there was only so much they could do, but they were doing a lot. I mean, I feel like the grandmother going up there and talking to the counselor in person and setting up therapy for him, I mean, that's doing a lot. That's what you should do as a family member of a kid who's struggling. So I'm glad to see that they were all really trying to get him that help, but it could have just been too late, and so now we have to look at what happened that morning specifically as it applies to this case and the charges people will face. I don't know if this counselor will be investigated. I'm sure she's had some talks with authorities in the past few days, but it's, she gets a call from the mom who says this. And it's weird because when the mom called her and said this is an extreme emergency, for her to then reply to the mom and say, oh, yeah, he's been talking about school shootings this morning. Why wouldn't the counselor actually have taken action at that point when she heard him talking about shootings? And given the fact she's already been told by his own family that he's been experiencing homicidal and suicidal thoughts. So she already was armed with that knowledge from at least a week before. So she knew this is a troubled kid, and then he's talking about school shootings that morning. So why wasn't that what prompted her to tell the SRO to go get him out of class? Why did it take the mother calling later to say, I think there's an emergency? And even then, we haven't seen any type of evidence that the counselor herself took any type of action other than said to the school secretary, oh, we need to go see Colin Gray upstairs, Colt Gray upstairs, or, I don't, like, it just seems like it was very lackadaisical. And you add this to the fact, don't forget, you add to the fact we already had a threat made to the school via phone call that morning, and authorities had already been to check it out. So how do you have all of these warnings, these red flags?
Oh, Magnolia.
And going and getting that kid?
Let me interrupt you. Great point. Remember, and they confirmed that they received some sort of threats that morning about a school shooting, correct? They confirmed that was true, correct? I heard it. I heard authorities say they...
Well, yeah, the sheriff said it at the press conference, that they had a report, and they went, and they investigated, and they said it was unfounded.
But here's the thing is that what the counselor was talking about to Annie, about him saying stuff about a school shooting prior to the incident? That they actually pulled Colt maybe into the school, somewhere, and asked him about him making threats?
Yeah, it could be.
It really could, because
he's the one who made the threat.
Because the counselor, according to Annie, the counselor says that she had a discussion with him that morning about a school shooting, about school shootings.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's just, we're looking at something here. There's just stacks upon stacks now of forewarning.
Red flags.
Like blazing red flags. So, number one, they get a call of a threat to the school. The police actually go there to investigate and say it's unfounded. Number two, counselor hears him talking about school shootings after she was just made aware a week ago that he has homicidal and suicidal thoughts. Number three, the mother calls the counselor and warns her. What else do you need?
That's why it's going back to the counselor. Now we shared something about the counselor on my Twitter. I put this out. And I also want to share that when we looked on, what did we do? We looked at the faculty, the Barrow County school website with the faculty members, and they scrubbed it in the last 24 hours, correct?
Yeah, they completely removed the staff directory from their website.
And
but that's okay, because we already had saved her page.
Yeah, she was listed. And this is confirmed. This was Colt's counselor, by the way. And I put out the tweet. And after I put this tweet out, and when I put this tweet out, we received her bio, which was on the site itself, on the website, Barrow County School District. And I said, Miss Lisa Butler was Colt Gray's counselor at Apalachee High School. Students have been sending us emails saying she is the worst counselor, doesn't do her job, and some even blame her. The grandparents of Colt Gray called Butler a week before the shooting to warn her about his mental state. Actually, they actually went there. Didn't the report say the grandmother actually went to the school?
Mm-hmm.
And then I said...
In fact, she met with the counselor.
She met with the counselor. So the counselor's aware of Colt Gray a week prior to the shooting from the grandmother. And then the new bombshell, the mother of Colt Gray, spoke with Butler Wednesday morning before the shooting, warning her of an extreme emergency regarding her son. At the same time, Annie Polhamus claiming that the counselor's claiming that Colt was talking to her about a school shooting before the shooting even happened. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's just bizarre. It's like, I wonder what Marcee was thinking when she called and told the counselor that there was an emergency, only for the counselor to be like, oh yeah, he was randomly talking about school shootings this morning. Like, I wonder what Marcee was thinking. She was probably like, what? Then why haven't you gone and gotten him already? Also, it's such a weird detail in this story that there just happens to be two kids at the school with the same name. That is bizarre to me.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, and in the same class? Because they're saying that the administrator went to the class and neither one of them were in the classroom. And she got the other Colt's backpack. So there's Colton Gray and Colt Gray. And just like I said before, what an absolute unfortunate mix-up. Like, that's just so strange to me that you would have two kids with the same name in the same classroom on the same morning at the same time that all this is happening. So it's just like mass confusion. But you would think, I understand that he had only been going to the school for a couple days, but are you telling me that the school administrator and the teachers didn't know the difference between those two boys? I would love to know what Colton Gray looks like.
Actually, looks pretty close, similar. I'm not going to show him because he's a victim in this, and his name was, raked through the mud. If it's the same guy, but there's a guy with the name, but it started with a K, and it was really bad. They were plastering him all over. He looks similar. It looks similar to him a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, that just kind of goes to show that these teachers really don't know their students, I guess. I mean, I feel like if I'm a teacher and I have an Algebra 1 class, second period, and there's two kids with a similar name, that would stand out to me immediately on day one. And I would make an effort to say, okay, Colton is the one who wears green all the time or whatever, and Colt's the one who never talks. Like, I would make a note of that as a teacher and really make an effort to know which is which.
I personally think the counselor should be put on administrative leave at the very least. And I only say that because, I'm looking at other examples, and other officials at other mass shootings have been put on leave during the course of investigation. I'm not saying she should be fired, but this definitely needs to be looked at. If she was aware,
yeah,
she didn't do nothing.
Well, she was given every opportunity you can think of to help prevent this, and it was not prevented. So I don't think that all the blame can go on her necessarily.
No, all the blame's going on him. I mean, he did it. He's responsible. He's facing.
I'm saying there's other people that played a role here, because I also think that Ellie obviously dropped the ball that morning, not just her, but I think, administrative leave, at least until they figure out her role in all this, and if charges may be warranted. I don't think she needs to be going back to school tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, considering, let me play this clip, because you shared, we talked a little bit yesterday, and I got this clip. I put it together. Let me call you right back, Magnolia. I want to play this clip of Magnolia yesterday, because Magnolia talked to multiple students, and we're sharing one example of one student that got a hold of us and was talking to us about the counselor.
Another thing I'll mention, which I don't really want to go too much into this, but another thing that was mentioned by this student, he thinks that the school counselor should share some blame in this.
School
counselor. I'm not gonna mention a name or anything like that, but he did mention that he said, I believe my school counselor is to blame. She's a horrible counselor. She puts everything off and only does the bare minimum. None of the kids ever talk about their feelings to her, because she's just the type that just changes your classes when you need to. And basically, they're saying that she doesn't care. And that people would go out of their way to avoid her and even change counselors to not have to deal with her. So,
but what is the counselor's responsibility there with him? Like, what does the counselor do? Just monitor what he's doing, what the students do? What does a counselor do in school?
Well, it seems like there's an expectation that people can talk to the counselor about problems they're going to. For example, if you're being bullied in school, you should be able to go to your school counselor and talk to them about that and get some sort of support from them. And that's part of what a student counselor should do. They also counsel students on their classes and, what kind of credits they need for college and different things like that. But the expectation is that you're supposed to be able to go to your counselor if you're having an issue in school with other students or teachers, or if something has happened. As a student, there's like a chain of command in a way where it's like if something happens to you, you're getting bullied in the bathroom or something, you're supposed to report that to your teacher and report that to your counselor and talk to your counselor so that the issue can be addressed. And so what this student is saying is that this particular counselor really didn't take too much interest in the kids like that. Like, she was just kind of there changing classes or doing the administrative type parts of her job and not really putting too much into the counselor part of it. So that's something that's being said. So I just wanted to share that. I'm not going to say the name or say that this is her fault or anything like that, but it's just something to think about. And also, how much responsibility should school counselors have? What is there anything that the counselor could have done to help Colt? I don't know. It's worth a discussion, though, I think.
Now, that was before the new bombshell revelation that has just been shared in the last 12 hours. We did that yesterday before it became apparent that the mother contacted the school, at least warning the school, and according to Annie, the aunt of Colt, notifying the counselor being aware of this, school shooting talk, and the counselor being aware. Crazy, Magnolia.
Yeah, someone in the chat said it's a lot of students for one counselor. They have 4 counselors at that school.
And
Lisa Butler is just one of them.
It goes by letter of your last name as who you get assigned to, correct?
Oh, I have no idea. I just know that there's 4 counselors there, and Lisa Butler was his counselor.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And I was looking at Lisa Butler a little bit. I was looking at, she was, I guess she used to be a juvenile sex offender counselor for the Department of Juvenile Justice. This is her LinkedIn bio. She came from Taka. She was a former counselor at Clark Valley. Here's her stuff here. Public LinkedIn bio. This is the counselor, and I was just looking at her. Lisa Butler, elementary school counselor at Clark County Schools. This was 2 years ago, and apparently then she came over to Apalachee, and but this is her LinkedIn bio. So apparently she dealt with juveniles on probation and parole. She was a parole officer or something like that for juveniles before she became a counselor, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. So, she's not the only counselor at that school. She just has the reputation as being the worst counselor at the school. And what the student told us, Jonathan was just playing, he said that kids would actually go out of their way to get a new counselor to avoid her because they didn't want to even deal with her at all. So that's not good. In my opinion, if your students don't have faith in their counselor, and it's not just one student that has an issue, it sounds like lots of students have this issue with her. It probably is something they should have looked at before, maybe. But again, this is a new school year. They had been, now I had seen on the calendar that they actually started back to school the 1st or 2nd of August, something like that. So school had been in session for about 3 weeks or so. And we were told that Colt was actually enrolled only 2 weeks ago. But then he didn't actually come to school until just this past week. And he was only there a couple days before this happened. So, I guess with it being a new school year, they want to see how things go. I don't know, but it just sounds to me like there have been issues with this counselor, and I have to imagine that some of the students even complained, because if they're going in asking for a new counselor, there has to be a reason for that.
Yeah, I say administrative leave, and just on that aspect, but there could be others too. There could be others, a chain of command within that. If something just tells me that in this situation, as more gets revealed, because remember, we're still technically fluid in this because it's only happened days ago. We're less than a week since this tragedy happened. I think more is going to come out. And I think it's going to probably be because just preliminary, we saw so many red flags going back all the way last year to the FBI visit, or the police, the Jackson County sheriffs with the FBI on the Discord. But it just seems like red flags all across the board. And I have a feeling there's going to be more that come out.
Yeah, and I also want to say one thing about the mother. I want to... I'm glad that we kind of waited to get more information before we really honed in on her role in all this, because, we could tell that she was maybe not so involved and maybe not around, and it sounds like she lives far away. But I do want to say, I want to give kudos to this mother, because even though her efforts didn't ultimately prevent this, she did the right thing, and she's doing the right thing. She did the right thing by calling the school immediately when she thought there was a problem. She got in her car. She started to drive there. She's trying to do what she can. She did the right thing here. She's also, when I say she's still doing the right thing, she spoke to the Washington Post, and she expressed remorse for the victims. That is what a mother should do when their son or their daughter or whoever does something wrong and breaks the law and harms other people. That's what a mother is supposed to do. They're not supposed to hang up on JLR in a huff and then go on Facebook and run their mouth blaming everyone else but her son. I just want to throw that out there.
She's talking about the incident that happened last night with the shooter.
Yes, the behavior from the Kentucky mom last night, that's the wrong way to act when something like this happens. Thomas Crooks's parents have never one time expressed remorse for what their son did. And I can't stand that. I can't stand that. It's like, I understand they don't want to be in the spotlight and they don't want to, get all this heat on them. And I completely get it. But there is a way to handle this. And in my opinion, Marcee Gray she did everything right, and she's still doing everything right. She's not going out there doing all these wild interviews. She's not going all over YouTube. She's not doing all this random stuff. She's remaining quiet for the most part. Now her sister is doing the talking. Her sister and her dad are out there front and center doing the talking, which is fine. They have every right to do that. She's taking a moment here to collect herself and actually think about the victims and what happened to them. And, she's speaking on background with the Washington Post, which is a reputable, depending who you ask, they're one of the major newspapers. This family provided text messages. She told them what she did to help prevent this, sort of the chain of events, some of the things that led up to this, so that we can get an understanding of what happened and what went wrong. And so I just want to give kudos to Colt Gray's mother, because I think people should give her kudos.
Well, also the grandparents. If you're going to do that, the grandparents to me seem like they tried to fix this situation or bring awareness to the situation too a week prior.
Yeah, the parents, her family as a whole seems that they were really trying to get him the help he needed. There's plenty of evidence now to support that. So, yeah, that's also how you handle it. But in this situation, I feel like they were limited in what they really could do because, you know, they're living down in Fitzgerald, which is, I guess, 3 hours away. And I'm sure that the relationship between the Polhamus family and Colin was not on good terms. Marcee wasn't even allowed contact with Colin. So they were in a situation where it was like there's only really so much they could do, but I think they did do everything that they could.
Yeah. They might come out and give more statements. They might say something. She might come on YouTube. We don't know. We'll listen and monitor, but seeing this situation at this point, I can't say, because a lot of people were speculating in the beginning that, since lumping the mom with the dad, and the mom has all types of troubles, drugs, addiction. Yeah. Drugs are real. Addiction's real. A lot of people struggle with addictions and do wild things under the influence of drugs. Yeah. And you got to be accountable for that. And you got to take ownership in that. And you got to get clean and everything like that. But people are lumping her in with the father. I've seen a lot in circulating saying the mother should be charged too. The mother should be charged too. A lot of people were saying that if you go all over the forums. But now seeing,
because people jump to conclusions, which is not something that we did. I mean, it's definitely worth talking about Marcee's track record and her rap sheet that goes back years, just to kind of get an understanding of what this kid went through. But it was clear to me that over the past year or so, especially, that Marcee and Colt, that she wasn't really around as much because she had that violent episode in November. She was arrested, she was in jail, and then she was later sentenced, and she went to rehab. And we're talking now, we're into like the spring of this year. So for that whole period of time, she was dealing with her own like legal issues, rehab, the addiction, things like that. And her family clearly was supporting her, trying to help her out of this. But at the same time, she's not around Colt. She's not there with him every day. She's not able to keep an eye on him. So, but she apparently kept an open line of communication with him because she's the last one he contacted before this happened.
Interesting. Yeah. We are definitely paying attention to this. Anything else to add? There's pretty much nothing else really new. Oh, by the way, I showed that photo of him. It said cruelty to animals. That was a part of, Marcee was part of this mix in reference to the cruelty to animal aspect. When I say cruelty to animals, we're talking about an incident. What year was that? Around 2020, Magnolia? Where
they were evicted.
They were evicted out of a home, and they left the home behind. When they left the home, they left a bunch of dogs behind in the home. And then they went back to the home to retrieve guns instead of the dogs.
Yeah.
And the landlord was, went on the record and said the landlord was like shocked by that because of, leaving behind dogs and more worried about guns. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. The only other thing, so I sort of touched on this earlier, but it looks like that the mother was spotted yesterday.
Oh yeah, I got that photo
outside.
Yeah.
And they're saying the mom of accused school shooter Colt Gray spoke out Saturday for the first time. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Marcee told the New York Post outside her father's home in Fitzgerald. She appeared devastated as she carried pillows inside the home. She was wearing a pink t-shirt, jeans, sneakers, and a large cross necklace. Asked if she had anything to say to the families of the victims, she said, "Nothing to anyone right now. I'll have my time to speak." She also declined to discuss the haunting apology text Cole sent before he opened fire. She said, "I'm not going to talk about details or anything." Let's see if she said anything else. Yeah, I don't think that was it. So it sounds like some reporters were outside her father's home in Fitzgerald, and they caught her while she was walking into the house, and she made those brief remarks.
Yeah, that's what the paparazzi do, right? The cameras are out there trying to get photos of the subject involved in a case. That always happens when these cases happen in the very early stages. You know, the paparazzi are seeing what the family are up to.
Yeah.
So probably expect to see more pictures coming out moving forward.
When's the next court date?
December 4th, but subject to change. Grand jury in October is handling the case. And or if Colt gets more charges, the DA, Brad Smith, said that he'd be brought in and face an arraignment on those new charges.
Yeah.
So right now, both father and son have court December 4th. December 4th. So we'll definitely be paying attention to this. If any other thing breaks on this case, new information on this case, you will hear it here on Magnolia and JLR Investigates. Magnolia, you're doing a great job on this. Magnolia really is, got honed in on details here, and we want to get the information out there of what's transpiring, and we'll continue to be on this case for sure. Anything else you'd like to add, Magnolia?
No, I think that's it.
All right, thanks for the time. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. JLR Investigates. Sub to the channel, like, hit the notification button. Praying for all the victims, families. Remember, victims, everyone out there, man, we're just praying for all the first responders, the families, the school, the faculty, everyone that has been affected by this terrible tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers are out to everyone involved. We're just trying to get an understanding of why this happened, how this happened, and point out the major red flags. I mean, we have to be all in agreement here. You might not be in agreement with some of the things I've said, and that's cool. That's a discussion. Let's have a discussion. But to me, I think we all can say there has been serious red flags that transpired before this. So hopefully we'll get more answers. I think the families deserve answers. I'm sure some of the victims' families and school students been watching these lives. Y'all deserve answers, and hopefully you'll get them soon. All right, folks, JLR Investigates. We cover true crime 24/7, 365. Thanks for watching. We'll talk soon. Have a good day.